I am so excited for this podcast. Welcome, everybody, to Second Nature. We are going to talk about my favorite subject today, athlete sponsorship. And I've brought somebody on who knows this business so well. And we are going to have a really fun and interesting discussion that I think is going to provide a lot of insight for both athletes and creators, as well as brands, because you get a chance to really dig into the behind the scenes of how this whole thing comes together. I might even say that this is the truth about athlete sponsorship. Kelly, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I'm so excited for this one.
Thank you, Aaron. I'm super stoked to just have some one-on-one time with you. So, and I know that your questions will be thoughtful and intentional, which is really important.
No pressure at all. I feel like this could be like a 10-part series. There's so much to dig into. But I think where we should start is sort of how you ended up being an agent in the outdoor industry. How did you get to this point?
Yeah, that's always the first question, I think, for people who aren't really aware of my background. So the bread and butter to my company, Rad Boulder, is that I started as I'm a lifelong chef, and I started the company with a focus on feeding professional athletes. And that sort of became a vehicle to the gateway to me as an agent and manager, because I spend my days with professional athletes, feeding them, and I often travel with teams for, weeks on end globally. So I stay at a house with them and just become, a little closer than probably normal when you spend 24 hours a day with someone for a few weeks. So they trust me in a really unique way. And then quite honestly, the people that hire me for those particular roles are the brand managers, the athlete managers that represent each of these brands. So in a nutshell, that is also the person that decides who they're going to bring on the team and who's signing what contracts. So everything just kind of grew together over the past decade. And over the years, people would just reach out to me from both sides of that coin, whether it was an athlete manager or a brand manager that was looking for a specific person that sort of checked boxes they were looking for, or they would just straight up ask, like, hey, can you help us audit our existing athlete team and maybe like have some fresh eyes to see what might be missing. And then the athletes in general would also just reach out to me every year around contract season to just brainstorm and ask for advice. So I really enjoy the work, and I think I'm fortunate to have two of the best jobs in the world, I think, but I suspect there are a lot of people that would not like the jobs I have. But I wanted to, it was important for me to make sure that I was not just ready to officially represent people, but that I had the knowledge to do so. Because, Aaron, when someone asks you to be their agent and you represent them, they're trusting and assuming that you know what you're doing and understanding that process and have the respect and care for both sides of that coin. So I just really wanted to make sure that I was more dialed than I needed to be before I said, okay, I'm officially going to do this. Because up until that point, about a year and a half ago, I wasn't taking any money. I was just doing this all on my own because I just love the community and I love doing it. There's a lot of things I'm not good at in life, but it turns out I'm pretty good at being an agent. So I wanted to be so intentional with whether I was not just ready, but across that finish line ready.
How did you actually prepare? Because in my experience, a lot of people know enough to be dangerous, and then they just jump in and like, yeah, cool, I can put this and that together, and then you give me a cut of that, and let's just go. I know that there's a lot more to it, and it's not that simple. But you took some extra steps before you started really taking on clients. What did you do to prepare and feel like you were ready for this role?
Yeah, that's your statement of knowing just enough to be dangerous is sadly accurate, because that's kind of where it's sort of similar to coaching, where a lot of people get excited about, I've been an athlete my whole life, so therefore I know how to coach. So they become a coach, and then they take on people without getting educated and certified. And honestly, just having the experience, there's something, when I started cooking as a kid, I was a prep cook for years before I thought of even going or applying to culinary school, let alone going to culinary school. Everyone wants a piece of the pie, but nobody wants the recipe. They just want to just jump in and do it. So for me, that meant reaching out to other people in the space who are agents in other categories. Because honestly, I've really learned the most from people who are not in this space. So it became, once I just started digging down, going down this rabbit hole of like how to become the best proper agent and manager. And I work as both an agent and manager, more of manager than anything. But I very quickly recognized that every sport and their governing body had their own separate, like, this is what you have to do to officially be an agent legally. And, trail running, as we're sort of wild west of things. Like, we're not quite at that level yet. So anyone can do it, which, to your point, is where the danger is. So I started studying for the USATF test, and am now studying for the World Athletic Test. So to back up a minute, to be certified, actually, like, legally able to represent an athlete in track and field, road and track, you have to be certified in your country, sometimes a state, depending on where in the world you are globally. But it's in the United States, it's USATF. And you also have to have World Athletics. So both of those are required. That's not required in trail running, but I would really love to be the best version of the role that I want to show up in. And I'm also here to make a lot of just growth and changes in our sport and help trail running grow the way that I know we can in a really safe way. And that involves young kids who are coming up from high school to the collegiate level and do start on road and track. So I can't work with these guys unless I have this, but it's also just knowledge. And the knowledge with these tests, as far as what does that USATF test look like and what does World Athletics look like? It's ethics, Aaron. It's the process of it all. It's how to represent not just an athlete, but yourself, and how to show up in a room respectfully for that other side of the coin, which is the brand. And that, to me, is paramount. Like, that's the very bottom of what we should be doing. There's so much good stuff above that, but just understanding it. This is not an episode of, I joked off camera earlier, but this is not an episode of Entourage. This is someone's life. And we're not here. I often hear people say, oh, I'm going to stick it to this brand. And I'm like, what? That's part of the problem.
Yeah.
We all work together. We're going to get more for each side in a more holistic way if we're educated on how to approach each side.
So you mean I can't just read Chris Voss, Never Split the Difference, and be an agent? I have to do more than that.
Please don't just do that. Yeah.
Well, I think it's interesting because you're so sort of early on in trail running and managing and doing deals for athletes. Whether you like it or not, you are sort of an ambassador for future people that will pick up the mantle and also become agents. And you're setting the bar and the expectations for the brands of what it means. So while it might not be required, anybody dealing with other agents in the sport is probably going to hold them, basically up against what you are doing in terms of your qualification and the work that you've done to be at that level. So you're sort of professionalizing the agency side of managing athletes and stuff like that by doing those things and sort of setting the benchmark, which I think is really important for the long-term viability of both the athletes and future agents to come after you.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I hope so. Not for the shine on myself, but because I truly hope that is a pattern.
Yeah.
It's really the best way. I know that you see this as well. We're in a really cool crossroads for trail running. We've got the Olympics here. We've got more people like starting to get to work with agents and management because money is starting to come in a way that we haven't before. So if we start moving forward at this point with a shortcut, if you start with a shortcut, you just have crap. Like, if that's where you're starting, what's left, right? If we don't have our ethics, what do we have? So I feel like if we can start at this place and grow from the best scenario, then we have a chance at being like such an exceptional sport. And if you look at this, I mean, like the big three, basketball, football, baseball, right? They've been around for decades. They started this a long, long time ago. So to create that growth and strength within this sort of like kind of branch of those sports, there's a lot more backpedaling and work to be done to grow and to kind of to fix things. We have the chance right now and the tools to start out of the gate with like exceptional service.
Yeah. Okay, here's the question that I field all the time is who needs an agent? Because I see a lot of kids coming up who think an agent is going to get them their first sponsor. And that is, in my opinion, not the right. Like, you don't need an agent. You don't even have a business that requires help at this point. But actually, I'd love to know sort of from you, like, who is the right athlete that would, what qualifications would they have, or what needs would they have where your services really are vital to their success and growth and everything like that? What is the perfect athlete or perfect scenario for you to take somebody on?
Yeah, I wish honestly more people would ask that question, because the number of emails that I get from people who assume they need an agent and have not asked that question. That's why I have such a large group of, like, I hate to use the word decline, but people that I'm like, you don't need an agent. Like that I straight up will tell them, you don't need an agent right now, and this is why. So but I agree, very, very few people need an agent. And for me, yes, it depends on kind of where they're at money wise, but also because trail running is in this unique space and we're starting to see more money, but not at the level of, let's say, road and track in certain areas, or cycling in certain areas, because we all know cycling doesn't have a whole lot of cash either right now. If there's someone, if for me it's let me see your race resume. Let's look at your one sheet. So I look at results, but I also look at what they're making right now, Aaron, and if they have an existing partner or not. And then I go from there. So if it's someone that's like not making six figures yet, but it's easy for me to see that they should have been making six figures like 2 years ago, that's someone that I'm like, I know I can help you. That does not mean that I take that person on. I have a few rules of my own. I also keep my roster at 10. So I don't work with any more than 10 people, because to give the care to those 10 people the way that they expect from me and the way that I think they should be cared for. If I go outside of that, I can't do my job properly. So the people that need an agent, if you're kind of at that doorstep of where you should be making six figures, but you're not, or someone who has so much going on and they are at that kind of podium of athletes that are deep in the six figures for a while, but also have like a book deal going on and a podcast and all these other entities. To me, that's someone who probably needs, I don't know, 10% managed or 10% agency and 90% management of just helping get things organized. And where I step in for that person is, to your point of the question, it's easy for me to see what's in someone's way and what's holding them back. So I can let them know what I see there and how do we remove those things. So that's where I'm like, if I can help you because it's easy for me to see what's in your way and I know how to remove these, then I can say yes. If they're a good fit for me, it's all about vibe. Like for me personally, if I don't have a good vibe, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. For the athletes that are out there that don't need management yet, I do think that one of the key skills to develop and sort of the benefit of not having an athlete is that you as an athlete need to learn how to build relationships with people, especially at brands, and sort of like get reps doing that. Because when you get to the highest level, that's expected from a brand that's going to pay you a solid chunk of cash, that you kind of know the ins and outs of relationship building and collaboration and stuff like that. And whether you have an agent or not, you still have to do that kind of stuff. And so it's important at those earlier levels that you sort of own that skill, and you can't farm that out to somebody else right out of the gates. Like, you have to learn this skill of being able to build a relationship from scratch and collaborate with people. And that can happen at even a product sponsorship level. It's a great way to get started and to start building up. And you'd be surprised how quickly you can build from there. And that's something that you can't really replace, right? Like, you are looking for people that you vibe with, but you probably, as part of that kind of gut check of who to work with, you're looking for, like, what do their existing relationships look like? Are the brands that work with them really pumped on working with them? Because it would be a nightmare for you to take on a deal with an athlete that, all their brands were just kind of gritting their teeth to get through the contract with.
Yes. Oh gosh. Yeah. So I have 3 rules, and my number 1 rule is no assholes.
Yeah, that's a good one. Just life in general, right?
In general, because that's a big part of it. It's easy to get more for someone if they're a nice person.
How do you think about the way that athletes sort of, like matching up brands with athletes? What are the things that you're thinking about as you're representing the athletes when it comes to approaching different brands? You can use an example that you currently have or just in general, but like when you get prospective athlete and you're looking across the brand landscape of who to introduce them to, what are the considerations that you have as you're kind of introing and building and thinking about what that might look like?
Yeah, it's so important to ask that question, and for me to have the conversation with an athlete. So when someone first reaches out to me, if they feel like something, like I could take them on officially as with full representation, or to do a consultation with, I immediately we chat a little bit back and forth on email, and then I'm like, okay, I'm going to send you an intake form. And this intake form has just a slew of questions. The first one is literally, why do you want to be sponsored? Which is a really important question. And if I worked with an athlete for 10 years, I would ask them that every single year of those 10 years, because that answer is going to change. But within that list is also, what are you looking for in a partner? What's important to you? So I find out everything about this athlete from this intake form. And then I ask them, well, who do you want to partner with? And then when they show me this list of who they are interested in, then I can go back and forth with the information I have from them on the intake form and the brands that they're interested in. I can let them know where things overlap or how they don't overlap. So Patagonia is a great example of this. So many people are coming to work with Patagonia. I'm like, oh, that's great. How do you feel about the environment? Like, what do you do in your community to support environmental work and sustainability and these things, knowing what boxes are important for Patagonia to check? And they're like, oh, I just really like their gear. I'm like, dude, you're not a good fit. This is never going to happen. And I'm absolutely not going to waste their time with this conversation, because the brands also trust me. They'd be like, Kelly, why did you send this person to us? Because it's not a good fit. And I know it's not a good fit. So it's interesting to explain to different people, like, what are you looking for? If they're like, I'm looking for this, what's really important to you? I really need a team that's close to me in the United States. And then if their answer is like, but I want to work with Salomon, I'm like, that might not be the best fit for you right now, but let's chat about it. So hopefully, does that answer your question?
Absolutely. I think one of the things that I talk to athletes about all the time is like helping them understand what their value proposition is, especially in today's day and age. You have so many different levers to pull besides racing, where you could be a content creator, or you could be kind of doing a little bit of both. You could be doing events. You could represent so many different opportunities for these brands, and you have to have sort of that one sentence, like, what is the thing that you do, so that we can communicate that directly to the brand. And also we can gut check against, like, does the brand want that? Like if you're trying to do really high end racing, like an entry level bike brand might not make the most sense. If you're talking to mostly beginner riders, then you probably don't need like a $15,000 bike brand, that you're selling. So getting that alignment too of like what the athlete's value proposition, like who are you and what do you represent and why does that fit with the brand is also, when you do get that alignment, it's incredible. And then project ideas come from that and collaborations come from that. And, you know, it makes everything, and particularly your job, a lot easier when it comes time to like start putting the pieces together, and the deliverables, expectations, all that stuff starts kind of aligning all the way down the line when it comes to that, which I think is really important. And another thing that I think a lot of athletes miss, like they come in and they just want to be sponsored because that's what I'm supposed to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they never really think about, well, what am I actually bringing in terms of value that this brand can use? I see it so often too, where, you know, athletes don't really have much of a plan outside of racing, and they're sort of at the mercy of the brand and the brand's needs. Like, cool, you don't have anything going on for a couple months. We need someone to go out and talk to our distributors. So that's you now. And all of a sudden,
Right.
You know, the lack of a plan becomes someone else taking it over and running with it. So I'd be really curious to go back to the part that you were previously talking about, where you're, you know, managing 10 athletes and you are, you know, kind of balancing out being both an agent and a manager and being able to understand like the blockers and all that stuff. I'd be curious how you identify the things that are in an athlete's way, and maybe are there some common themes when it comes to those blockers?
Oh, yeah, that's a lot of. I think it's important to say this as well. So for people who are not aware, what an agent does is negotiates contracts, works through your partnerships, helps you with that, right? And then once that's done, you, depending on who you are, if you have your whole kind of like, I don't know, I hate this word, but portfolio setup of who your partnerships are, then the agent role is pretty quiet to a point unless you're checking in on things. So that's where the management role comes in for me. And within that, that's where I'm making sure, like, talk to me about your coach. How's your coach going? Are you a good fit with your coach? Do we need a new coach? Have you outgrown your coach? Do you love your coach? Do you need media training? Let's get media training. Do you need a media training, but why would you need media training? Like, what's going on with that? So there's all the key components that we're working on there. And then just throughout the year, things will come up. This was on one of Free Trails podcasts for Worlds. Jennifer Lichter is an athlete that I represent, and Jennifer got injured like a week before Worlds. Oh. Which was so tragic and upsetting, but she was in Spain and she called me and told me what was going on. And she's like, I need to make the decision if I wait and do this or that. So we did a lot of troubleshooting, and that is very much a manager role. That's not so much of an agent role. And it's really just caring for the person, because Jennifer and I are very connected and spend a lot of time together. And it's honestly working through things like this that help deepen that management relationship. When I take someone on, I tell them this often, like, if we're ready to sign with each other, like, I'm going to be all up in your business. So if that's not what you want, I'm probably not your girl. Maybe we should find someone else for you, but I will be all up in what you're doing. And just making sure that everything you have what you need in life, and that you're surrounded by good people. So Jennifer and I spent a lot of time in the middle of the night on the phone calls in Spain, back and forth from Colorado to Spain, of trying to just work through things. And it's easy and organic for a management role and that management hat to move forward in a really holistic way if you're doing your job well. If you're like, it just happens as it should be happening, because Jennifer and I have allowed trust within each other and just kind of set the table for when trouble does come, that we work it through together. I don't know if that answered your question, but
I think it's really important to have those people, you know, that you trust, that are sort of in your circle. And I think a big part of your job probably as an agent is finding the best possible fit for people that are also going to be on your team, an expanded team, right? What is
Hmm.
that conversation like, or maybe some themes that you see kind of coming up when it comes to dealing with the brands themselves? How do you sort of set the expectation? Deliverables are the big word right now of like, well, we need them to do this, we need them to do that. But how do you really set expectations with the brands that you're working with? I've got to assume that's a big part of the conversation ahead of time before the ink even comes anywhere near the contract of like, what is this deal going to be like? But I'd love for you to kind of walk us through that phase of the deal as you're sort of setting the details in place.
Sure. That is so for those who aren't aware, the body of a contract, depending on how long it is, it could be anywhere from like 3 pages to 30. And within there's all these different clauses and parameters and things that must be followed. And then, of course, there's the money and the bonuses, but there's a whole section of the deliverables for an athlete. So that includes appearances, social media, podcasts, product development, like working with different things. So the big ones would be, and again, I have close relationships with the brands. So it's really easy for me to be like, if it was you, Aaron, if you were the brand when you were with Red Bull, I would be like, hey, Aaron, this is great. These deliverables feel a little bit heavy. This is not a person who's really comfortable doing this. So it's probably also in Red Bull's best interest to back off a little bit of this. But if we can back off from this, maybe we could give you more in this sense. Or maybe we do something I don't know if you have like, if there's 10 appearances a year, then I might say, how about if we do 7 a year, but like half of those are 2-day events or something that's just like a little bit of a deeper investment that helps the athlete. This particular athlete will settle in after a day. If you're just flying in and out, I know what's going to happen. This athlete's going to be really just worked up and anxious, and they're not also going to show up in the best way for Red Bull either. So how can we work on this? So a question I get often is, well, how did you do that? And my answer 100% of the time is all I did was ask.
Yeah.
I just had a conversation. There's so much. One of the best things about a contract in my mind is they're really fun because they could be so unique to the individual if we take the steps to do that.
Yeah. I see so many boilerplate athlete contracts that you can, there hasn't been any real consideration for the athlete in particular and what their strengths actually are, where you could build a contract for each one of these athletes that actually fit so perfectly with their value to the brand, what they do best. And yeah, sure, maybe there's some results based stuff in there, but how do you tailor each individual contract to make sure that you're getting the best out of that athlete? And, I like to say this phrase of like wringing value out of everything that we do. And so, like you've got somebody who's really good at this thing. Let's make sure that we represent that. I think one of the biggest things that I've seen brands kind of miss on is not set expectations correctly for athletes. And then when the contract is over and they get cut, they didn't know that they weren't delivering the thing that the brand wanted. And it's tricky because, some people at brands will say, I don't want to like put too much pressure on them to do this specific thing. I don't want it to feel forced. For example, we didn't really have anything about like, you have to show the can every time you're on the podium because we didn't want to make it feel forced. But when athletes did that, it was like, thank you. But there was no like, you didn't get a bonus for that necessarily because they didn't want to make it feel forced. But then somebody who doesn't have like a product shot anywhere on any of their social for the entire year gets, in trouble or gets cut or whatever. And then it's like, well, wait, I didn't know I was supposed to do that. And so I think this idea of setting the expectations, not even deliverables, but just expectations. Everyone else at that business has a KPI, a key performance indicator, except for the athletes, which to me is kind of funny because in my mind, athletes are the best at setting goals and chasing after them. And brands, more often than not, aren't giving athletes targets to hit. It's just like, cool, you just be awesome and here's what you get. And the athlete sometimes doesn't even know what they're supposed to be doing. And, if we've done the work to align the brand and the athlete ahead of time, then maybe that's not an issue at all. But more often than not, I feel like you don't typically know what you're being judged on. And that can be a really tricky spot to be.
Yeah, it really can. I think that's probably one of the benefits of having someone on your team that's an agent, because every athlete I work with speaks to their athlete manager for a brand on a regular basis. Um, and then I also check in at least once a month with the athlete manager. I'm like, how's Aaron doing? What's he not doing that you'd like him to do? What is he doing that you love? What do you have coming up next month that Aaron has kind of a quiet year. He's just finishing up his race series or season and would love to just do something for the brand next month. Like, what can he do to be a part of? But having those conversations. So if any athletes that are listening, I would have recommend that you just again, and Aaron, it goes back to what you said, like build a relationship. And that's how you build a relationship, by having communication, but asking those questions and just having FaceTime, that's really important to just ask, what should I be doing? Like, what am I not doing? Especially if it's like an athlete who just signed their very first deal, right? And you just don't know what's going on. If you're like, I think I'm doing it right, but I don't know, right? That's important stuff. But it's a conversation I have on a regular basis.
I feel like that conversation builds trust a lot too, because that person on the brand side feels that you're invested in the overall success of the partnership. I mean, it feels so obvious to you and I because we've had these conversations with so many athletes and from the brand side and everything. But I think a lot of people are maybe not asking those questions of their teams of, hey, like, is this working? Am I doing it right? Is there stuff I'm missing? Is there stuff that I'm doing that you really like that I should be doubling down on? And just having that open dialogue and making it okay for the brand to be like, well, actually, now that you mention it, we've been wanting you to kind of go this direction or do this kind of thing. Like, what do you think? And then you've opened a dialogue to be even more successful and make that contract renewal a lot easier. My goal is always like, how do I make it just like an easy yes? Like, you'd be silly not to continue doing this,
I love that. Yeah, there's something, I feel like people want to do that. And for the people the athlete managers who have not had athletes do that on a regular basis, when someone does, it's a breath of fresh air. And immediately they're going to be like, oh, we have a trip to the Dolomites coming up for a photo shoot. Who should we bring? They're like, Aaron, he's always up for stuff. Like, let's bring him out. Like, it's human nature, right?
Yeah, you're top of mind with that athlete manager. They're walking down the hallway at the office and somebody mentions something. You're like, oh, I have exactly the right person for you.
Yes.
More times than not, especially when I was at Red Bull, I mean, we plugged athletes into all kinds of wild things. And sometimes it's just those little anecdotes that you're sharing, like there was a story where Dylan got bit by a dog in the middle of this race in Croatia. And he told me that story. And I happened to be walking past somebody from Red Bull Media House and they ended up making a cartoon about this. I'm going to have to dig it up.
Find that. I want to see it. Yeah.
He ended up winning the race too, but he got bit right in the butt by a dog.
Oh my gosh.
Halfway through this race, but it made for a hilarious cartoon. But it was because I was at the office and somebody was like, hey, we're doing this series and we need like crazy athlete stories. And I'm like, oh, I just got one. Here it is. So, it's amazing how those little like moments end up turning into, I mean, you never know where some of that stuff is going to go. I mean, we've made full on feature length films about these moments that we just learned about in passing and we expanded on and learned more about and kind of took it from there.
Right.
I guess like along those same lines of those conversations between the athletes and the brands that you're facilitating, are there any trends that you're seeing kind of across the board that you're seeing brands ask more and more of the athletes that you're working with?
Excuse me. Trends as in
just what are they?
Just anything?
Yeah. Are they asking for anything in particular that you just keep hearing the same kind of like thing over and over?
I would say, well, this is a good question. there are trends that go on in the community that brands don't care about, which I feel like is a really important conversation. Like 200-mile races, right?
Uh-huh.
So especially brands in Europe, they not of interest to them. Um, if you have someone who's just running a 50K, they're like, I run 25K and 50Ks, right? That's my jam. I win all of them, but I run a 50Ks. That's what I want to do. But also I want to work with On and Nike and I don't know, the North Face. My response 100% would be On, Nike, and the North Face are not interested in just a 50K runner for this season because A, B, and C. They would probably take one person on in that category, but that's not what they're looking for holistically. So if the athlete says, but I really want to run with the North Face, like the North Face is interested in UTMB, Hard Rock, and Western States, but I'm a 50K runner. I'm like, are you listening to the words you're saying? If you want to run with them, this is not what they're looking for right now. So the trend of certain distances, like it's cool. Dan Green is a great example. Like he's not a 200 miler. He's run a 200-mile race and won and did really well at it. He'll probably throw in a 200 miler once a year, once every other year, but that's not his bread and butter. Dan is doing JFK 50. He ran Western States. He ran CCC. Javelina, he's podiumed at. So he has a really good versatility to him in the distances that he runs. That's something that is a pattern for brands, and brands notice instead of just being like one specific distance sort of thing. So I think what's happening outwardly in the community that's exciting might not be the same pattern or thing that like a brand is looking for. So I think it's important to look and see like where those things overlap and where they don't. So that's one pattern for me with people who are like, why am I not sponsored, or how can I get sponsored if this is what I'm doing? If what you're doing is a pattern in the community, but not a pattern of what the brands are looking for, it doesn't really matter what you're doing.
Interesting. Yeah.
And not to say, before someone comes at me, I'm not saying what you're doing does not matter. And I'm not saying if you're a VK specialist and you're the fastest VKer in the world, that what you're doing is not important or difficult or impressive, because it sure as heck is. Or like the 200 milers who are just doing 200-mile races for the most part. That's impressive. I'm not saying that what you're doing is not important. But if it's not what the brands are interested in, are looking for, then it doesn't matter.
Yeah, and you have to then do the work to find the brands that do care about those specific things, kind of going back to our value proposition of just because, there's a group of people that are really interested in this particular thing and you're doing that doesn't mean that all the brands are also on that same page. I would like to think that the brands are paying attention to the community and all that stuff, but I think it is also very easy, just based on what we see, isn't actually what's moving the needle for the brands and for, sales, which ultimately being an athlete is being, part of that sales team to drive attention to the brand so that they have credibility, they have visibility, they have, they're getting that consideration. All that stuff comes downstream of the athlete. But if you're not driving meaningful, results in that way, then it's a difficult conversation. It doesn't set anyone up for success if you're doing. It
really is it's a hard conversation. I think too, sorry, I went to Kodiak this past week and I came home with some funk. The average person can only run 200 a year as well, right? And most people probably shouldn't be doing 4 200s in a year. So that's where the sales thing, that's where that stops. Like when it's happening, it's really awesome and exciting. But if that's all we're doing, then that's kind of where the brands are like, this is great, but it's sort of a quiver race. We're not just looking for that person. And I only use the 200 race because Mammoth just happened. But, there's someone, an athlete that reaches out to me from Germany often. And he's like, this is what I've done this year. And I've won every one of them. And I'm like, I love what you're doing. You're an exceptional athlete, but these are all like 8K races or this, they're things that brands are not looking for, Aaron. So
Yeah.
it's a hard conversation. One of the things I do as in my role, because I have to have a lot of hard conversations around the good ones, is I speak to sports psychologists myself to say, like, hey, this is what I need to say or how the conversation I need to have with an athlete. Can you help me with my delivery? Because again, I grew up in a kitchen. Delivery is not something anyone cares about in a restaurant kitchen. And it's important for me to show up in a way that like my words are coming through with the meaning that they need to deliver, but that I'm also compassionate. So I work with sports psychologists myself to figure out how I can best show up for that.
I think your feedback too, you want that to land in a way that helps the athlete understand it and make a change if they need to accomplish the goal that they're after. And there's nothing worse for you to give them accurate feedback, but for them to just be like, I'm not listening to that. I'm going to keep, punishing myself with 200-mile run after 200-mile run until I get sponsored. I think actually in the sport of mountain biking, I came up as a trials rider, which is a very, very small sport, discipline within the sport of mountain biking. And you could be the most famous, best rider in the world and still not have sponsors because it requires a specialized bike. There is a big community around it. And what's really confusing is that actually some of the best trials riders in the world command the most views on YouTube. Danny McCaskill and Fabio Idmer are the most famous mountain bikers in the world, and they're trials riders. So how come like no one else in trials gets that stuff? But the sort of thing that people miss is that they are doing some of that stuff on a bike that looks like a mountain bike and not on a competition trials bike. And so,
which has no seat, right?
That's right.
Yeah. I love this parallel so much, Aaron. And Danny is, I'm a longtime Danny McCaskill fan, so I love this parallel, and it's perfect. It's exactly, yeah.
Yeah, I think there's only a specialized chunk of people that are ever going to buy trials bikes. And so being sponsored as a trials rider is a very, very difficult thing. You can literally be the best in the world and have no support. And then, for me, I realized that and kind of pivoted into more mountain bike stuff using my trials fundamentals. And then I got sponsored, and then it got, easier. And so there is like a path of less resistance that you can take, still utilizing your skills, still doing the thing that you love to do, but you have to make that decision. I could have very well been like, you know what? I don't care about sponsorship. I just want to ride trials and make trials videos on YouTube. And I don't care if I have 0 followers, I'm still going to do this. And that would be okay. I think selfishly for me, I was like, no, I'm working really hard. It would be cool to have people to collaborate with. And I think I wanted the collaboration more than I really even cared about the support financially, although that part is great. I really wanted collaborators at brands so that I could go do even more stuff or have people to riff on ideas with and build out interesting things. And so that was for me the reason why I switched, because I thought, what is my actual goal here? Like you said, why do I want to be sponsored? It's so that I can do really interesting things and collaborate with people, because I missed that when I left Red Bull. I didn't get to collaborate the same way, and I really want to be able to do that again. And so I'm doing it a little bit on my own terms at this stage, but I think, the why of it all was there, and it made that switch easier. And I'm sure there are people in the trials community that are like, dude, what? Like, what are you doing? But
Aaron's a sellout.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so interesting. It's not, and to your point, whether you stayed traditional OG trial or if you did pivot, it's the same as like if someone that just does a VK and that's all they do. Like, I'm not saying you're not going to get sponsored, but I am saying it's probably going to take longer, and you might not start at the same level monetarily or with that ideal partnership that you're looking for if you just stick to that.
Yeah.
So it's a good conversation. Yeah. Thank you.
There's a scene in the movie Joe Dirt where he goes to a fireworks stand and he's like, hey, where are all the good fireworks? And the guy's like, no, I just like the snakes and sparklers. He's like, you don't have the ones that go boom. Like I want all those. Like I'm trying to buy stuff. Like how are you going to sit there and operate a fireworks stand? You don't even have fireworks, and I think about that a lot of like, well, are you selling snakes and sparklers when you're putting your program together? Like, yeah, there are probably people out there looking for snakes and sparklers, but there's probably a much smaller, circle of people trying to find that. And you can, to your point, you can absolutely find those people, but it's going to be harder and you might not be successful, or you might really struggle to get to where you're trying to go versus like, sell, give the people what they want, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting. Also, that's a great movie. I haven't watched it in years. I'll have to do that.
Well, I've been talking a lot about the content side of, that's really what's helped me create value for the partners that I have. How does that play into the athletes that you're working with? How do you see content? Because I think you have a lot of real competitive athletes, if I'm not mistaken. But how do you see kind of content playing a role in the development, or is it content, or are there other things that you think can really help sort of expand the size of a deal when it comes to putting contracts together for athletes?
Yeah, content for sure. It feels a little sleepy right now, or repetitive, right? Like everyone wants to do a film. Everyone wants to do. So for me, it's like, okay, what is this person? What does Erin bring to the table that no one else does that we can add? One, that to make this really fun and unique for Erin, but also that Erin brings to the table for this brand that no one else on the team has. So if you were my athlete, I'll just use you if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah.
My guinea pig here. Content is great. No one cares about TikTok anymore. That ship sailed a while ago. YouTube, brands are still like, oh, does Erin have YouTube? Hold on, let's look. And they go and look it up. But one thing that I really love that I would do with you, especially as you have such a diverse background, is if you like speaking, I would have more speaking engagements with you if with really like impactful things. So we talked about my first rule of no assholes. My second rule is the athlete must be purpose driven outside of themselves as an athlete. Like I'm not interested in working with someone that just wants to be on a podium and make a lot of money. Those are great goals, but that's not what I'm here for. So I want someone who has more to that. So let's say Jennifer Lichter is really big into rescuing animals and working with foundations that do so. So with Jen, I would have her work into her contract that she gets support from the brand for whatever foundation that she's working with, or if she wants to start the Jennifer Lichter Dog Rescue Foundation. But I would also have her work on one of the things Jen and I are working on is like just how she shows up and presents herself and represents the brand and herself. So to me, the best way to do that is just public speaking. So media training and public speaking on behalf of her new dog foundation, hypothetical dog foundation. If it was you, I would absolutely ask you if you wanted to go and just do a little bit of travel in the quieter time of the year for your race season and see if you and the brands that you're working with could support you to go and speak to like youth riders in trials, kids who are, or maybe they're in trial, they've been in as a trial rider for a while and they want to move into how did you do what you did, Erin, and why did you do it? So you have such a great, one of your superpowers is, I feel like you probably know this, but you're really approachable. You have a great, your voice has a really nice soft delivery, but you're also just kind of like cool and easy to roll with. So for me, that speaks to youth, and youth in sport is growth in sport. And we can't go wrong with that. So I would ask you if you were interested in that, and then I would see how we could weave it into your partnership.
I like that. I think, well, thank you for that also. I think one of the things too, like going back to like having something that the brands are sort of looking for and being able to, I agree with you. I think the TikTok ship has sailed, until brands maybe figure out the TikTok shop side of things, it's probably not going to be important. And then when they do, it'll come rushing back potentially. because there is like, but again, this is the thing that's so interesting to me as someone who's really heavy on content as part of my overall package is sometimes the right answer, the best thing doesn't match what the brands want. For example, I've got 150,000 subscribers on my YouTube channel, and the average watch time there is 12 minutes and 45 seconds.
Wow.
That speaks to a mountain of credibility and trust that comes with that audience. If you had 12 seconds of engagement on Instagram, that would be glorious. 12 seconds versus 12 minutes. But for some reason, when my Instagram cracked 100,000, all of a sudden, all these people came flooding in. And I was like, where you been? Like, I've got way deeper ties to a community over here. Cool that I'm doing Instagram. And I understand that that's the language that the brand speaks. But also, like, there's a way bigger opportunity over here that you're not paying attention to. It's really, in some ways, kind of frustrating to be on that too. And don't get me wrong, some brands absolutely get it. And those are the people that support me right now. But it's really funny how like you can have the right answer, but like if the brand doesn't also align with that, then you're sort of SOL on that whole thing.
Yeah. And you're like, I have this golden egg right here. Can I give it to you?
Yeah.
They're like, no, thank you. We'll take the rubber one.
Right.
Yeah. I love the YouTube thing. That's what brands ask on a regular basis. I think we might have already mentioned that, but people dig YouTube always and forever, and there's also money in it. So if that would be something like, I love the content piece, but I would love to see people stepping outside of the usual things. So YouTube, like especially if your average watch is that time, to me that's like, oh, so we make a 10-minute film.
Yeah. Doesn't have to be over the top by any means. I think, I think also, and especially with brands, it's like what is sort of the acceptable thing that you can do at work, and watching YouTube at work is not really socially acceptable in a corporate setting, but like
True.
Somehow Instagram is. It's okay to scroll Instagram because all the athletes are definitely on there. So, and I think that's exactly why I got hit up so many times after I got like a reasonable audience on there, because I was speaking the same language as the brands, whereas YouTube didn't. Even though the data is there to say like there's people here, it's more about like what do the brands actually want. And so it's a tricky one. Like, again, going back to that idea of your value proposition and what you do and how you do and how the brand also values that back. It's a tricky balance, right?
It is.
Of deciding what you're going to do that matches the widest potential for partnership and development, but also, I don't know, tricky. This stuff is, there's no perfect answer, I think, for any athlete that's out there and any brand that's out there. And it's just a matter of finding the puzzle pieces that go together. And it's not an instant thing. I'm sure you have athletes on your roster where you've been looking for the right partner for maybe a couple of years to try to find like the right fit. And it takes a little bit of time. It's not an immediate, like, flip the light switch on. Oh, I'm working with Kelly. All of a sudden, every single one of my verticals has like a exclusive partner. It's over. We're good.
Yeah.
Cash the check.
Oh gosh, that's such a funny conversation. Before I forget though, one pattern I am seeing around content is brands. There's a couple athletes that I work with that have podcasts, and they're also on YouTube, recorded on YouTube, and the brands were just like, hey, we need some more equipment. And I'll be like, why is your podcast down? They're like, I need equipment. I'm like, well, let's ask your partner. And then we're like, hey, can you give us equipment for this person's podcast? Aaron needs new microphones and headphones. And they're like, great, send us what you need and we'll send you, let's figure it out. Like, they're on board to do that. It's just a matter of asking. But to your point, yes, I think there's a whole lot of people that probably think, oh, this person wasn't signed, and then they started working with Kelly and they were signed like a week later. Like, that's not the scenario. But I understand how it might look that way at some situations, but Again, this is a really awesome job. I love it so much, Aaron, but it is not, it looks probably glamorous and sexy from the outside, but it is exhausting and it's a lot of work if you're doing it right.
Do you think there'll ever be expansion on your team? Like, would you bring on other people to do the manager agent type thing kind of under your wing? What does sort of your future look like? Because you've got your 10 athletes, your dance card is full, but like there are certainly more than 10 athletes in trail running and beyond that would benefit from this level of support.
Yeah. Um, I pause at that heavy. I think a lot of people, and they've asked me this about the other arm of my business for years of like, well, what does growth look like for you? When are you going to open up a, brick and mortar? I'll never open up a brick and mortar. That's one of the best things about my business model is I don't have a brick and mortar. I can't go to races if I have a physical location. To me, growth is strengthening the business from within before expansion like that would happen. I do have someone that helps me uh, with some back end things that has been really helpful. They're a professional athlete themselves right now. So until they get to the point where they're probably not competing, I don't know that they will be an agent or ready to be an agent. They're also quite young, so they're really like just sitting back and watching all of the things unfold and just learning. So I don't know the answer to that, Aaron. I don't feel the need to have employees under me and or other people on the team. I really I like the intimacy and being able to manage and be there for the people that work for me. And that's why they come to me. If someone comes to me, they come to me for me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm always up, down the road to foster someone. But again, I have someone in that role right now that I think will be an exceptional agent one day when they're ready. So yeah, I don't know if I'm answering your question. I'm really hesitant to do that. Also, it's not been 12 months since I have been fully operating as an official agent.
Wow.
So for me, that's so far down the road to think about. I appreciate the question, but I don't take a percentage from athletes. I work on a retainer. So I work in a very different way, and in a lot of ways I work differently, but also just in that growth mindset. Like I think I'm cool just being just with the business model I have, at least for another minute. Give me another year and ask me.
Well, I think, like you are setting the bar for a lot of people who are coming into the scene, into the agency world, and I think that even if you don't have people directly that you're managing, you are sort of, setting the expectation with the incoming agents, with the brands and stuff like that. And I think that sort of exists as a level of mentorship and stuff like that too. So, I think it's exciting kind of how it's all playing out and yeah, I don't know. I'm just really pumped to see this whole thing continue to go, and just interesting to hear, your perspectives. Honestly, that's a surprise to me on the retainer thing too. I would have just expected like a straight percentage. So was there something that sort of caused you to think about retainer versus percentage?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Most people are shocked by that. And a lot of people assume, and I did myself as well, until I was like, how do I not do that? It just feels really slippery. And not saying that people that take a percentage are slippery, but for me, it just didn't, it felt counterproductive to what I want to help the trail community with. So, one, most athletes don't make a lot of money. And it felt weird to just be like, oh, you're signing with this brand for $20,000. And now you need to give me whatever. The going rate is like 12 to 15%. And that's just felt not cool to me. So I worked some things out and was like, okay, I can do this. This will work for me. And there's also a clause I'm happy to send you what my contract would look like, Aaron, redacted once you can see what it looks like. But there's a straight up clause in my contract that says anyone can leave at any time. It says something like, in non-legal terms, anyone can leave anytime. I don't wish to hold anyone hostage. So athlete wins the lottery and they're like, I don't need an agent anymore. Great. Good luck to you. But I really wanted to be fair to the athletes, especially as we start in this space of trail running. And then also there's this for the brands that say we don't work with agents or we won't work with you because you have an agent. I have a way that I approach that. But once I get in the back door and actually have a conversation with them, the very first thing I tell them is, look, dude, I don't take a percentage. So what you give them is not for me. It's all for them. So my motives are genuine because I deeply care about this person as a human being, not athlete first, as a human. So what you give them is all for them. I'm not in here fighting for them for my dollar. I'm fighting for their dollar. It's really easy for me, Aaron, to have a conversation with someone who says they don't like agents because I'm sort of the anti-agent.
I love that. That's so refreshing. That's awesome.
Thank you.
That's incredible. What a perfect way to sort of wrap that conversation. But like I said in the beginning, we need a 10-part series. There's so much more to dig through.
Yeah.
But we usually wrap up these episodes with a segment we call BPC, brand product content, where we kind of share brands we've discovered, products we love, pieces of content that really spoke to us. You're the guest, so I'm going to let you go first.
For me, this will be the last podcast that I do this with. I think I might have mentioned it to you, but moving forward, if someone wants me on their podcast, they either need to pay me for my time or they need to read or listen to a very specific book because it's a really important book, but it also kind of helps explain how I work and my ethos and where I come from, how I come up to this space. And the book is called Unreasonable Hospitality.
I just heard a podcast about this book.
Excellent. I love the audio because the author, Will, reads it. And he has a voice very parallel to yours. It's really just sort of like a buttery kind of radio voice. And it's wonderful and so full of emotion. But the author of the book is in the restaurant industry, and the book is about the restaurant industry, but it's not at all. And it's about his journey in purchasing 11 Madison Park from Danny Meyer, who is my absolute, without pause, favorite restaurateur in the world. And it's such a good book. Everyone on my team is now required to read it. Like I just took on another athlete a few months ago, and I was like, they're like, what else can I do before we start? I'm like, you have between now and next Tuesday to listen to this book. So, I know you have some long runs coming up, so put on your headphones. You got to listen to it. And it's insane to me the number of people that have read it. Like, saw a couple at Kodiak. One of my friends, her husband read the book also recently, and he stopped me on the street in Kodiak and was like, oh my gosh, this book is life changing. And it's just exceptional. Something tells me you'll like it.
Yeah. I listened to the author on this podcast not too long ago, and I just loved sort of the idea of not accepting sort of the agreed upon stuff and just like creating something like, this is how we do it in restaurants, for example. And he just kind of rejected that of like, but why? Like, what if you took every single opportunity and made something out of that thing? Like, where would you be then? I feel like in business, we hear so much about like, well, this is like, we could never do that, or, whatever. And the phrase that I learned from our buddy, Steve Holmberg, was, what would need to be true if? And I feel like that connected the dots a lot with the author of that book of like, well, what would need to be true to make this experience like something I would never forget and never talk about? And I think one of the things he said on that interview was like, I've done stuff for people like, the unreasonable hospitality thing, and they don't remember the food they ate at my like crazy special restaurant, but they remember the thing that we did. and just sort of redefining like these approaches to things, I think is just really incredible.
Yeah, it's so important, and it should seep into everything, right down to excuse me, if I have an athlete who's trying to get into a race and I get them into a race, they send a thank you to that race director. If they can't go to that race for some reason, they need to reach out to that race director on their own behalf. After the race, they need to reach back out and say thank you. And there's nothing cooler. I know that makes a difference, Aaron. There's nothing cooler than hearing from athlete managers or race directors or brand managers of like, it is such a joy to have your athletes on our team.
Yeah, that book. Okay, it's next in the queue for me.
All right, I expect a text message.
Yes, it will be in the show notes of this pod for everyone else. I will be listening to it, and it'll be in our Slack channel because Ming keeps track of all the books that get mentioned on the pod. So there's no reason for everybody listening to this not to find the link for this book. Okay, for my BPC, I've got to shout out the current reigning World Cup overall champion and world champion. I think I'm right on this one. At least World Cup overall. Chris Blevins, mountain bike cross country. He's the homie.
Savage.
What is really cool about him? I could go on and on about his style on the bike and his personality off the bike. He also founded this thing with some of his buddies called Still Spoke. And one of the things that they've been doing this year at all the races has been doing this project called Dirt Diaries. When you're a pro athlete, you have just insane levels of access to other top tier athletes and to incredible aspirational experiences at the races and stuff like that. And what they've done with Dirt Dispatch this year has been like being on the actual race course, catching these moments, getting incredible insights from the athletes themselves. And of course, Chris is featured in a heavy amount of that stuff because he's had just an incredible season, but also just like the personality, the vibe, everything that goes with racing and everything at the highest level. It gives you this sort of like inside look. And that just didn't exist before. And for it to have come from an athlete and be this good is just so cool. Even if he didn't have like the most incredible season ever, it still would have been cool, but even better that he had an awesome season. I don't know.
That's so neat.
Yeah, it turned out so cool. And I've seen a lot of people take a run at like, athlete style media. And when it works, wow. I mean, he's kind of doing a lot of like, almost like a little bit of what Dylan and Free Trail do at races and stuff like that, where you just get like the, right from the athlete directly after their race or in the moment or whatever. It's so cool to see it happening in mountain bike. So Dirt Dispatch is my BPC.
Ooh, I'm going to check that out. Thank you. Yeah. Definitely. He's a Tailwind athlete. Yeah,
he is. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Nice.
Yeah, such a good dude. And I couldn't be a bigger fan.
I love it.
Yeah. Cool. Well, Kelly, thank you so much for making the time for this. I know it's like you're in the middle of contract season right now, probably finalizing a ton of stuff, but you took a lot of time out with me today, and I really appreciate you being on the podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me on, Aaron. I have so much respect for you. This has been a real pleasure.
Awesome. Well, this is the end of part 1, but part 2, it's got to happen.